Alrighty, toffs and toffettes. Today we're talking Turnip 28. God save the Queen. She ain't no human being, innit? Alright, I am back on the Turnip train, and that was my flawless British accent. Today I want to talk about a cult that I have been working on designing. The Crispy Dandies. So, the main idea is that they take this sort of Petard from like Age of Empires 3 and make that into their special unit. They otherwise are just very fancy dandy people. So here's just a long list of tiny sources of inspiration. This is a foulard, apparently, like a fancy silk scarf that you wrap around your head. I don't know, but it seems fancy. I don't really know exactly the definition of what that is, though. A cravat. Now, I like the idea of giving all the dudes cravats. I don't know how to use green stuff, though. I've watched every single video. I got the Vaseline. I got the silicone shaping tools. I watched everything. I tried every combination of mixing milliput and green stuff, but I am just incapable of even making lumpy turnips. I'm almost brought to tears after spending 30 minutes of frustration trying to fill in a gap under someone's arm. So the idea of making a cravat seems impossible to me, but I definitely have seen people make way more intricate, way more detailed stuff out of green stuff. Color-wise, or uniform-wise, I like the idea of this sort of Legion of the Damned black coats, but with flames coming up. Here is Yorail Poof from that one movie. I like the idea of turnips with super long necks, maybe for the toffs or the bastards or something, and that sort of being a mutation where, they now have space for 6 different scarves that they can put on themselves, just have 6 cravats on. Actually, I saw a post on the Turnip Reddit where someone had done a similar thing where they made some brutes with super long necks, but I could not for the life of me find that post after looking for it. This is a cobweb covered with soot, which I thought just looked very cool and potentially turnipy. And now here is the rat on a stick. I think that could be a fun little heraldry thing for them, is just having a burnt turnip rat skewered on a stick. I figured in general, kind of aesthetically, that they would have lots of singed stuff going on as a motif. Maybe some of their fodder on their bayonets have skewered rats on them or something. So here is the Petard from AoE 3. This is Beau Brummel. I just listened to the Behind the Bastards episode about him, allegedly being the first celebrity, first fashion influencer, a very prototypical dandy kind of archetype guy. This is the fire at Moscow or whatever it was called during the that sort of scorched earth 1812 thing going on. I figured this would kind of play into the sort of Napoleonic strategy philosophy behind how the cult would work, and that they destroy their own stuff to make it more difficult for the opponents to play the game. This is a Petard that the said someone actually made a model for, and I will say, after trying to make my own Petards, it definitely would have helped to actually have a model to base it off of. This is a sapper from that whole Napoleonic era, which they kind of capture the aesthetic with the old guard, with the grogs and the slug's lament, with these guys with the big bushy hats and the mustachios. But mechanically, they don't really do any sapper stuff. This here is allegedly a baked potato that I found on Reddit, which I just think could be very fun to use as either maybe a source of ammunition for their stump guns or something, but these just a turnip that is just cracked and has like lava texture coming out of it. This is a real life petard and how it actually works. And, you know, you just take this like a bucket, fill it with gunpowder, put it against a board of wood that you lean against a gate or a wall, and then you just blow it up and then knock the gate down. You got the classic guy over here with his more of that flame shirt on the black cloth. This is a Fougasse. It is a basically old-timey landmine where you would just dig a pit in the ground at like a 45-degree angle, fill it with a black powder, and then top it with pitch and stones. And then you set up a tripwire and hook that up to a flintlock mechanism into the pit. And then when the other army, your opponent's army is marching, they trigger the tripwire and then basically explode all these flaming stones all over their entire army. It's basically a ye old claymore. And another guy, we got Blackbeard over here with his singed little mustache beard thing going on. I think, again, could be a cool aesthetic going for them. Okay. Quick little quote from Tomas of the Spotless Cravat. "You better keep in your place, you miserable swill buckets. I swear to Todd if I see your nasty tread prints sullying the virgin mud of our blessed cyst, my petards will blow you back to the seed age." So this is just another source of inspiration for these petards, is that the skirmish game version of this like universe is coming out called Swill, where you have little fish dudes and they have like a tank. And there's also rules for using those tanks in Turnip 28. And I thought it would be fun to kind of create these petards as like the Turnip 28's sort of world's response to these tanks, that they would have these kind of like anti-tank units. Okay, so first rule of this cult. I should say this is entirely unplay tested, 100% just draft 1 theory crafting mode right now. Snazzy Sappers. So snazzy, I don't know if that's actually, if they use that in Britain, so maybe there could be a better term for that, for better dressed, but starts with the letter S for that good alliteration. But basically, when you take your brutes, you can choose to reduce their number of models by 2, and then they get accompanied by a petard, which I went with brutes for a couple of reasons. One, just to go with the idea of sappers. They're generally like the veterans and like the old guys in the Napoleonic army. And I figured the petards would go along with the like sappers. Alternatively, I could see it making more sense with fodder, seeing as like how fodder are like straight up units that you would want to throw away, that you would put the petard with that. But I kind of liked the idea of the petard being like a very like noble, honorable position among the crispy dandies, where you really got to work your way up to have the privilege of getting blown up by this thing. I should mention, in like real life, you don't actually suicide bomb with the petard, or things go really, really wrong if that ends up being the case. You're supposed to like set it up, light it, and then run away. But it's just in the video game Age of Empires, you just run up with the bomb and then just explode with it, which I thought was a lot funnier and more in line with the Turnip world. Okay, so the Snazzy Sappers, yep, you get the petard. Now, again, I don't think that this rule, I don't think there's anything else that kind of works like this, so I don't think this is really how it would work if I were to do this ideally, in the sense that they just get ordered whenever you order your brutes, which I'm sure there must be some sort of complication or here, or like, there must be some other reason why other units don't have anything that work like this. There's probably some problem that I did not see. The petards themselves, just a super weak, terrible unit. Now, I said that they are considered to be equipped with close combat weapons because it seemed like in the rules that I read, all the units that don't otherwise, like that aren't otherwise equipped with anything, all say that they are equipped with close combat weapons, which I assume must be for a reason. But otherwise, I probably would not have these guys be considered this way so that they don't get those like charge re-rolls and are generally like even weaker and even more pathetic and useless. Okay, so their first ability, but to do and die. When they are in melee, they just always get destroyed. They always blow up and die, no matter whether or not they hit or miss. You just ram them into something and they die. Position Hoister. Now this, I think we could probably come up with a better name. I know I wanted to incorporate Hoist into one of the ability names to some extent. So this is kind of representative of their siege capabilities of destroying fortifications. So when they attack someone in defensive terrain, it blows up that terrain and makes it into dangerous terrain. Now, game-wise, this doesn't really actually like help a ton, or I should say it's like an even trade usually, in the sense that units in defensive terrain are harder to shoot at, but units in like dangerous terrain are much more risky to charge at. Which again, if these guys are getting accompanied by brutes who are probably going to tend towards melee, then this might actually not be a good thing to do. I guess conceivably, maybe there could be some strategy here where you have your fodder off to the side, and then you blow up their terrain with the Petard, and then you get a good shot with your fodder against those enemy units that were once in defensive terrain. Okay, and Scorched Mud. This is a sort of reference to Scorched Earth. So when they die, they blow up. They hit the closest unit within 3 inches, and that model just automatically suffers 2d3 wounds, ignoring vulnerability. And you also get a flame token where this model was. Okay, so the flame tokens, these were introduced in that Tragedy of Rust scab tank rules. And I thought it would be fun to sort of use this as a place to kind of incorporate this mechanic. I was thinking of going with the Petards giving people powder tokens, but the wig makers already, that's kind of their gimmick. And I was also thinking about having the Petard give people a bunch of panic, but that's kind of the rocket batteries niche. So I didn't want to step on either of their toes, and no one else was using the flame tokens. So I thought this would be a good place for that. Now for this rule. So this can affect your models. So if you got this Petard with one of your toadies, right, you're going to have to keep your Petard within 3 inches of him so that he can continue to be commanded. So if your opponent runs around with some whelps or something and then shoots your Petard, it'll blow up and then kill your toady. So they're kind of like a very high risk type of unit. But on the other hand, they just automatically deal a bunch of damage to stuff. So the idea is that they make for very good anti-boss monster type of units. You can just ram your Petard into a tank and just kill the tank. You ram it into their crab and kill their crab, or you ram it into their shell snail knights or whatever, and then you kill their knights. That's kind of the idea there. But they're just like pathetically worthlessly useless against big units like fodder or something, because they are only hitting models. They are not hitting entire units. So that's the sort of trade-off in mind there. Okay, the Forgotten Fougasses. So Fougasse, I don't know. This is the idea here is that your army has planted a bunch of landmines into the battlefield like long before the battle, but at this point you have forgotten where the landmines are. So each army, like both you and your opponent, get access to this, and every time units move, you can roll a die, and there is a chance that they end up triggering a landmine. And then this basically is another way to create the flame tokens. Okay, so I really, really like, my favorite kind of cults in Turnip 28 are the ones with what are on the surface symmetrical abilities, but then they have some secondary unique special rule that only affects them that makes the symmetrical ability not so symmetric. So in this case, your Toph becomes a fashionista, and they gain the Foulardian foil, which gives their units that they deploy with an immunity to these flame tokens. Which, again, I don't know if there's any other... I don't know if there's a rule that affects specifically the units just deployed with your Toph. I feel like, again, I feel like there's probably a better way to rule this rule. And additionally, I don't think there's any rule that just says, like, both armies gain this ability. There's probably a better way to word this rule as well. But yeah, basically you are triggering landmines. Your opponent's landmines, or their ability to trigger the landmines, is slightly less useful than yours because like a decent chunk of your units just happen to be immune to them effectively. Like overall thoughts, I think these guys might be bordering on a little too complicated. They might have a little too much stuff going on here. So they might have to like just, might have to kill a darling here and chop off some of the ideas here just to sort of simplify them a bit. Also, just game design wise, would these guys be fun or unfun? Well, in the unfun side, there's a chance that they just end up being almost like the blue player counterspell, because the whole idea of this army is like, all right, your special guy is just a counter to my big boss monster guy, so you just start the game, you immediately ram your Petard into my giant crab monster, they trade with each other, and now we're just playing a boring normal game of Turnip 28 where neither of us have our cool special units. But on the alternative side, I think these could be like pretty fun if they succeed in kind of capturing that idea of like this sort of escort mission almost, where you have to protect this super vulnerable unit and then transport them to the opponent's most dangerous, scariest unit. So that could be like a fun little changing of the whole how the game is played from that angle, potentially. Also, the idea of like, are these guys OP or are they un-P? I don't know what side they will land on, because on the OP side, maybe they just end up being like, well, I guess you just ram your petards into my big guy and there's nothing I can do, and he just automatically dies. And on the other side, maybe they are very PU because they just, maybe you just take your crab and you just walk away from the petards, and they just end up being really bad units that never end up doing anything. So again, that is going to require some playtesting to figure out. Okay, so I had some other ideas for cults that I wanted to try making in the future, which I know I'm probably getting ahead of myself. I should probably playtest these guys and really figure out if they work or not before I start making other ones. But I quite liked the idea of making swarms of little illuminated manuscript marginalia, little Hieronymus Bosch gargoylean creatures, little homunculus guys. I found some great 3D prints on the internet that I really wanted to use for these guys. And I thought it would be fun if they were sort of like swarm monsters, where you put a bunch of them on one base, and then they just act as tar pits. Kind of like in the same vein as snotlings for like the orcs and goblins. The only problem with this, right now, that's pretty much just what the rootlings do. So it's not really I feel like they need a little more zhuzhing up before being worthwhile into making their own whole cult. So I was thinking maybe there's like a big guy and like big root monster that once he dies, he sort of splits up into a bunch of these little gargoylean homunculus. I think that maybe could be something. I don't know. Okay, another guy I was thinking of, the War Wagon. I was thinking from Age of Empires 3, the German unit, which is basically just a horse-pulled wagon with some cannons in it. And they would effectively be mobile artillery, which again, this is kind of stepping on the toes of the Tragedy of Rust, because that's basically what the scab tanks are. They are just mobile artillery. But I do like this idea of like Napoleonic technicals of like the horse and buggy with artillery. So potentially they could just be used as a model for the scab tank. I was also thinking maybe this could be like a transport vehicle kind of situation, kind of like the truck, like a battle wagon for the orcs, where you just load up all your melee units into this like armored wagon, and then you just run down to the other side of the table, unload all your melee brutes into their back line, and then charge all their soft, squishy, vulnerable stuff. Another one that I was thinking, I wanted to do something with the early helicopter, which apparently there's one called the flying bicycle. I was thinking, since we're in old-timey times, maybe I could model it like a old-timey flying penny farthing. Which again, right now they already have a flying unit, the Aunts Ascendant. So I'm not sure exactly how to make these guys unique. Potentially it could be like a full-on dropship transport type of thing where you fly your bicycle in and then you deep strike your units into their back line. Or it could be like a full-on bomber situation, kind of like the 40k planes where they like fly across and then just drop bombs, but they enter halfway through the game and then leave a few turns later. Something like that, maybe? I don't know, but I think the flying bicycle could be very, very fun to model. Okay, the last idea that I had regarding Turnip 28 recently. So, the whole game is definitely following in that new age sort of philosophy regarding war games of shorter is better, and let's take these horrible, clumpy, 4-hour-long Warhammer games and just really streamline them so you can get a game done in an hour. Which I was definitely on board with that train for a while, but the more I think about it, I think I'm horseshoeing, I'm wrapping back around to the other side, and I think I'm actually deciding, you know what, if we're going out of our way to set up the table, we're setting up all the terrain, we're opening up our mini cases and breaking out all the minis, I don't want to play a quick game. Let's make this a proper event like it should be. And I think I've been leaning more towards actually preferring the idea of war games as big, 4-hour, complicated messes. Now, obviously, that has a handful of problems. Okay, but I was thinking for Turnip 28, right, if by default, the regular game, you have 3 to 4 units, and it takes a maximum of an hour, I want a full pike and shot experience where we have got 12 to 16 units each, and this is gonna take 4 hours. But you get to use like all your dudes from all your cults, and you get to field your entire turnip collection is the idea here. Basically, right, I want to try creating a sort of supplemental fan rule set for like from 40k to Apocalypse, that kind of deal. Or if you're cool, from Warhammer Fantasy Battles to Warhammer Legendary Battles. But I was thinking for the gimmick here, the twist, is we do not make it a simple 2-player game. This is a 3-player game. We introduce the concept of the Kriegspiel referee, who is not actually playing the game. They are just, refereeing it. They are kind of the mini dungeon master. They're just there to make sure that things are constantly moving, and the pace of the game is constantly going forward. A lot of the time, things that can slow things down is struggling to track stuff, which the referee can help with. Also to settle like rules disputes, which I can only imagine the bigger and more complicated the games get, the more and more rules quandaries are going to come up. So I figure, right, you can just have the referee there to instantly come up with answers to those debates. Okay, so the referee. So we're going a little bit back here to Rogue Trader, ye old Warhammer style, where the referee does actually kind of get an influence to, or an ability to like somewhat influence and participate in the game, in the sense that there will be like crazy random happenings where the referee will get to play as whatever units have just like wandered into the battlefield, or maybe they like get to command the like objective or something. Like if there's that one scenario in one of the Turnip books where there's like the giant monster that both players are trying to kill. Now, obviously, on the surface, the Kriegspiel has to keep up like a reputation and an appearance of being an arbiter of fairness and among both players and being impartial. But like under the hood, right, the true intention of the referee should be to make the game as interesting as possible for as long as possible. Because I do, like, I have definitely found that when it comes to those 4-hour games, you do sometimes run into the problem where turn 1, right, you fire your great mortar and it just hits their unit of knights dead center and it wipes out half of them. Then they fail their leadership test and run away. And that unit of knights was a third of their army, and not only just a third of their army, it was the most important third of their army, and their entire strategy was built around these knights. And now you're kind of put in an awkward position if you are on the receiving end of that, where you're just like, well, do I just concede right now because there's an effectively 0% chance that I win this game, and there's a good chance that this is just not going to be a fun game for either of us because you're just gonna spend the next couple of turns steamrolling the rest of my army. But on the other hand, right, like, I guess there's still technically a not 0% chance that I lose, so I guess, like, should I just play it through anyway, even though there's just a very high chance that this is going to be an unfun game for both of us? It's a little bit of a catch-22 position to get stuck in. But I think the Kriegspiel referee could kind of sort of massage the game into the direction where like things like that don't really happen, or that like it feels like both players have a chance until towards the end, which on the one hand, right, there's that sort of problem of like, well, what's even the point about caring about getting lucky, or what's even the point of playing strategically well if the referee is just going to influence the game and then make it even anyway? Like, why should I even bother? which is a fair point, and that's why I think it'll be extremely important to very much so focus on striking that balance between giving the referee as much room to interpret things as possible while still making everything feel as concrete and out of the referee's hand as humanly possible. Which again, I don't think that'll necessarily be an easy design challenge, but I think it'll be an interesting and fun one to give a shot. But yeah, so we'll see if how much work I get done on this, and the real hard part about this is going to be convincing anyone to playtest this with me. But we shall see. All right, yep, that is all I had in mind. All right, I will catch you guys later.